The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, thank you for joining today's Tech Break, sponsored by Index Engines. Today's topic is Profile and Clean User Shares. My name is Jim McGann. I'm Vice President of Marketing here at Index Engines, and I will present for you today. I'll take you through a couple slides, and I'll show you a demonstration of the product. We're keeping it to 30 minutes today. It's a Friday afternoon. I know everybody has a lot to do. It's getting ready for the Super Bowl, so I wanted to keep it short and sweet. If you do have questions, type it in the chat area on the right, or my email address is on there. I'll put it at the end of the session as well. You can send me a direct email if you wanted to ask any specific questions. Let's get started. One of the biggest challenges that our clients are faced with is really the volume of unstructured user data that's basically clogging up email servers, disk, even legacy backup tapes, for example. An example of one of those environments, this is from a recent client situation that we did. They did a 10 terabyte proof of concept where we set up these policies, and part of what we do here at Index Engines is develop data profiling policies that allow you to understand what you have. One of the biggest challenges that our customers face in managing their data is really not understanding what they have. So if you look at this environment where we have a 10 terabyte filer, looking at all the data, about 73 million documents, you can set these profile policies to look for redundant or duplicate content, looking for large files that are taking up space. These large files could be multimedia files like videos and movies and things like that. Looking for content that could be sensitive, that has credit card numbers, social security numbers, looking for multimedia files, looking for email messages. But the important part in cleaning up and profiling this content is finding the content that's really kind of abandoned and outdated. So we'll talk about that a little bit, but abandoned data that hasn't been modified or abandoned data that hasn't been accessed in X number of years. So these profile policies that can be set up could help you understand the percent breakdown of these. And when we do these, we see, depending on the filer and the type of company and so on, we see all sorts of different stats. But the one that's pretty consistent is the volume of duplicate data. It's typically anywhere from, high 20s to low 40s in terms of percentages of the redundant or duplicate content. That's a big chunk of your filer. So if you've got a 100 terabyte filer, 20 to 30 to 40 terabytes of it is managing duplicate or holding or storing duplicate data. Large files typically represent a significant portion. Data that has sensitive content as well as the abandoned stuff. And the abandoned stuff is I'll explain how we determine what abandoned content is. But abandoned content is something that can take up significant volumes of data as well. So having this view, this high-level profile or these reports and analysis into this content is really critical for reclaiming capacity and managing user shares as well as any network storage. Our product is called Catalyst. It's a data profiling and disposition engine. It's sold either as an appliance-based solution or a VMware implementation. Basically, we have different flexible pricing models. One of the questions that's already come in is about pricing. We have pricing models that basically are priced based on the number of terabytes, and it's either metadata only or full content pricing, and we can get you details on that as a follow-up. But it's a high-speed indexing platform, integrates in the storage environment, and really maintains that index of unstructured content. Some of the key points of the Index Engine's Catalyst platform is that it can integrate to both primary and secondary storage. So we can index your user shares, as we're talking today. It could also index legacy backup tapes or disk-to-disk backup targets. So it's designed for the data center to integrate into the data center to be a very high-speed indexing engine that will incrementally update itself and be very cost-effective to deploy. Performance is always an issue, obviously, when something's on your network. We're going to use NFS or CIFS to crawl through the network. Also supports NDMP if the server is NDMP enabled. So with that, you can control the performance by throttling the bandwidth, managing only incremental updates, so that the rate of change of data is not a significant on a day-to-day basis, so you can just do the incremental updates. And then you can define a schedule. You can have it run daily at off hours, if you do have off hours on the server. I know a lot of our clients are international clients where the servers are being used continually, So there you can just throttle the bandwidth down very low and do it at a a time that has the least server capacity. We're focused on the unstructured user data, so Office documents, PDFs, text, HTML, audio, video, multimedia files, things like that. Also support profiling of things like SharePoint and things like Exchange email, Lotus Notes email as well, so we can get into some repositories. So we're being able to find the volume of content or the user files that are really kind of clogging your user shares and network filers. Another important point is the profiling options. You can profile either a light profile, which is metadata only. So if you're really looking at managing server capacity and managing network storage, metadata is usually typically fine. You can do a full content profile, and full content is going to get you inside files and emails and attachments and things like that. So if you're doing things like security audits, looking for stuff that would contain sensitive files like PI, personally identifiable information, like credit card numbers, you would need full content. If you're just looking for stuff that's aged out data or even duplicate data, a light index is sufficient for that. Full content would also be used for things like keyword search. If you were looking for a keyword for your legal department, maybe a legal discovery or e-discovery request, you would need a full index of the content. One of the key and most important points of the Catalyst platform is the ability to integrate to Active Directory and LDAP. So Active Directory allows you to take advantage of the reporting capability within the Catalyst platform, but reporting not only by user, which is pretty standard, but by Active Directory groups. So the nice thing about groups is if you're going to look and say, you know, how much capacity is being used on the server by the HR department or R&D or manufacturing, you can do that because you can basically inherit the Active Directory group information where it'll take all the owners of the documents and attach them back to their Active Directory group. Another important point here is active versus inactive groups. So when users typically leave the organization, you'll put them in an inactive Active Directory group. So you can kind of search on your filers and say, hey, show me all data that's owned by inactive users, people that are no longer with the organization. That we classify as abandoned data. So looking at that, you can say, hey, you know what? 40% of the data on that server is owned by people that are no longer here. And then you can check out the access time of that content or modified time and see, are people using this? People, if they're not using it in a couple of years and it's owned by someone that's no longer with the organization, it's pretty much abandoned and no one's ever going to know it's there. So working with departmental groups, you can do reports that are summarized based on these groups. And a lot of our customers are starting to implement things like chargebacks. I know a lot of organizations haven't done chargebacks recently, but doing chargebacks to see your data center costs and your server capacity, knowing how much different organizations or departments are using that capacity, and you can basically have detailed reports on that and leveraging these chargebacks to be able to manage that capacity. Also, one of the things that we take advantage of through Active Directory and security is doing the indexing of the ACLs. So you can determine what data may have read, write, or browse permission. So if there's sensitive content that's seen on the network, you can look and figure out who has access to that content. So these are the kind of policies that clients are doing. Here is different classification policies on the data. I spoke earlier about abandoned data, the stuff that's owned by ex-employees that has no access in, say, 2 or 3 years. One of the biggest issues with clogging user shares and network storage is this abandoned content. When your users are leaving the organization, you're going to wipe out or clean their desktop or their laptop, but most of their data exists out on the network in the wild. That stuff just sits there and never goes away. Of course, it may have business value. People may be accessing it, using it. That stuff you can tell by the data profile, but a large chunk of it is stuff that has no business value that no one even knows exists, and that's really the stuff that's clogging out your network. Looking for age data, very similar to abandoned data, but it's stuff owned by current employees that has no access in, say, 3 or so years. Looking for redundant data. So even though we're doing a metadata-only index and profile of the content, you still get a document signature of the file. So we use an MD5 hash algorithm to create a unique document signature of files, and we can tell exact duplicate content. And duplicates or redundant data account for a significant amount of capacity, wasted capacity that's out on the networks. Personal files. So a lot of people are just looking for things like iTunes directory. So you can search on file paths and say, show me all the file paths that contain the word iTunes, and get a listing of those paths and find out who owns the content in those directories. You can search for multimedia files like videos, movies, vacation photos, things like that, images. So that kind of stuff. And you can find, hey, show me the top 50 users by capacity of multimedia content that exists out there. And you may want to be able to understand that to be able to warn them and say, hey, that's personal stuff that shouldn't be out there. Clean it off the network and reclaim a lot of capacity there. Finding risk-based data, sensitive content such as PII or data that's required for e-discovery. Find data that has intellectual property there that has long-term business value. A lot of people take everything that they have in their email and their file systems and move it into archives without filtering or classifying it. This allows you to apply policies to determine based on user, based on location, based on type of content, even by keywords if you're doing full content. Is this data provide value to the organization? Should we maintain it and preserve it in the archive, or is it stuff that we can expire off the network? And then managing data in place, active data. So if it does hit one of these triggers based on one of these data policies, the specific disposition action will occur. So I'm going to jump into a quick demonstration of the technology. Okay, this is apologize. Here we go. Now we're good. So this is the user interface. I've already logged in. And on the left, it's a very Outlook-centric view of the world. So on the left, you have different queries and filters. And the important part about the Catalyst product, which I'm showing you here, is that it's very dynamic. That allows you to go in there and apply filters and policies and queries to store these queries and execute them on a scheduled basis. So if I want to go in here and filter, I can start filtering by location. So you can see here there's a couple of set locations on here that are your network file shares. You can integrate through Active Directory to your networks and crawl through your networks to find servers and locations that exist out there for indexing and set up those jobs in the admin interface. I'm just going to filter based on this server. So if I do that and filter, I can get a series of reports here. And there's a reports tab that shows you a whole bunch of canned reports. And one of the more popular ones is basically modified time, or I can do something like access times. So you can see those options here. So if I want to go, let's go into modified times, like that report here. And you can see these are active reports. So if I go and I uncheck this stuff and say, I really just want to focus on this stuff that hasn't been modified in 4 to 5 years, this content. So I could filter down further on that. So by doing that filter, you can see now in this results tab, you're only showing the stuff that's 4 to 5 years old. If I pop over to my owner report, so I can say, who are the owners of this content? So the fact that we're integrating the Active Directory, we're going to resolve these SIDs and show these owners. So Bruce Wayne, our Cape Tiro here, is the owner of about 46% of the content, followed closely by Eric Cartman, and Bugs Bunny is in a distant third. So you can kind of look at this stuff and say, really, what I'm really interested in is these folks, these organizations. Or I could, if I wanted to keep these selected, one of the things I want to show you is maybe the group membership. I'm not integrated here to the groups. So group membership should show you what Active Directory groups they belong to. Should have checked that before I clicked on it. But so let me unselect these folks and see it's really just these 2 users. So these guys, these 2 users have a significant volume of content. This is a demo server, so it's only really 10 gig, but this could be 10 terabytes of data that hasn't been modified in more than 5 years. What types of files are these? You can go into file type report, and you can kind of see them and say, hey, you know what? I'm more interested in, XML files are important for us, or maybe PDF files are important to us. I can dig down even further into that. If I look at how much of that content is duplicate, you can see here there's a bunch of it is redundant duplicate content. You can look at the size of the files, see the breakdown of that. So all these reports are set up by location's another good one. Actually, since I filtered only on that one specific server here, it's all going to be on that server, but it'll show you where they are located on the network. I could also look at the results tab. Now this is going to give you specific file listings of this content. so you know exactly where this content resides. And I can select all of it or some of it, and then I can specifically set my specific actions on this content. So there's a number of things that can be done within the interface. Is you can take action on it by deleting it. And when you delete it, it'll maintain a log of what was deleted, when, and by who. You can download a CSV text file, which will give you a listing of that if you wanted to use third-party tools to manage the content, say encrypt the content. You can extract it or move it. You can reassign the owner. A lot of these environments may have owners set to admin due to copying and managing data using some copy tools. We can do some analytics of the metadata and reassign the owner to the appropriate owner as well. So there's a number of things you can do to trigger the disposition of that content. You can set up the policies to do it on a continual basis. So, but the disposition will allow you to clean it up, move it out. Maybe you want to move it to a cloud environment. You want to move it to an archive. You can move that content out to clean up the content and reclaim capacity. Okay, so that's it for the demo. I'm going to go back in to finish up here. We wanted to keep it short and sweet, so I know it's Friday afternoon again. So some of the sample workflows that we see and clients are leveraging the Catalyst platform for is obviously the age data cleanup. It's really probably the number one reason that many of our clients are using our technology is to clean up old and outdated content that's outlived its business value. Cloud tiering to migrate data to the cloud based on policies. So you can maybe say for these specific users, move their data to the cloud because they're no longer with the organization. For data that hasn't been modified or accessed in 3 years, move it out to the cloud, and so on. Same with archiving, managing multimedia files, know who has them and where they're located. PI security analysis, looking for PSTs, for example. So you can go back into the GUI and you can say filter and just show me all the PSTs that exist across these file shares. And if you index a number of different file shares, you can do a federated view across all that content. Storage capacity allocations, chargebacks, migrations, consolidations, tech refreshes, and audits, all sorts of things that can be done using the Catalyst platform. So some of the best practices to kind of wrap things up for today is really to start small. A lot of our clients go in with 10 terabytes, 50 terabytes, 100 terabyte user shares, and kind of focus on managing that content. So you can start small, and the platform is very upgradable. A single appliance, if you're going with a physical appliance, can index up to a petabyte of data. So if you're starting with 100 terabytes, you've got a lot of room to grow, and it's just a really licensing upgrade to be able to upgrade that capacity. So it's very cost effective. A lot of our clients come to us when they have servers on their networks that require capacity upgrades, whether it be a disk-to-disk backup like a data domain environment, or whether it just be standard network file shares, NFS or CIFS filers. You may want to, instead of looking at upgrading capacity, to analyze the content, do an assessment, and determine really what's on there. We had a client that did have a 100 terabyte filer on the network and did some data profiling on that filer and ended up removing a significant volume of duplicates, a significant volume of age data, migrating it off that filer and putting it onto external storage or even offline, redundant content, age data, data that shouldn't have been on there, and took that 100 terabytes down to only 20 terabytes, freeing up 80 terabytes of capacity. So, it allows you to really manage your footprint and use the data much more effectively and really monitor data growth by user so you can look at, trends, and all the reporting can be stored and saved so you can look at what is the storage usage this month versus last month and do some analysis on that. Also, a lot of our clients are engaging the legal and records management team so you can provide a view into the content. So I don't know how many people on this call are constantly getting legal or compliance requests or requests from the general counsel to be able to manage data more effectively. This allows you to provide a view into the content. You'll notice that the user interface is a browser-based interface, so you can give them web access to be able to look into the content and the reports and understand what exists, and that allow them to help develop the data policies that you could easily implement through the Catalyst GUI, and they can define the rules. So a lot of the challenges companies that have had is to define policies, you really need to understand what exists out there. This tool will allow you to help understand what exists and help define and implement those policies. And not only do that, but audit the policies. We had a customer that had a policy that no PSTs were allowed in the organization. They were too risky, and it's a way for email to be hidden and not really viewed across the network. So they blocked the ability to create PSTs. We did an audit on that environment and found that there was over 14,000 PSTs scattered about the network. So in that case, they knew the policy wasn't being implemented correctly, had to rework it, and now they're safe and protected from those evil PSTs. And then also we see customers implementing chargebacks, as I mentioned earlier. It's a great way to really have your different business units participate in managing and cleaning data, especially when you start charging it back and saying, hey, you know what, you're being charged significant expense on this because you're storing so much data. And if they come back to you and say, well, what do I have? You can give them a view into that content and enforce cleanup policies. So next steps as we wrap up is really we have a number of white papers. If you want to reach out to me, I can send them to you. We've got a number of consultants on staff here that can reach out to you as well and answer any technical questions you may have. But we do have a number of different white papers that talk about using profiling to clean up data, reclaim capacity, manage intelligent disposition. We also have evaluations that we could support as well. And if you're have an environment that needs some reclaiming of capacity and profiling, we can work with you on those and do some POCs and so on. So reach out to us. Feel free to request a copy of the presentation. I've recorded this presentation today. If you have any friends and colleagues that you'd like to pass this along to, we'd be happy to do so. But I think we're pretty much at our time limit. I don't know if we have any additional questions on there. We did have a question on pricing. As I mentioned on pricing, it really depends on your environment, but it's really capacity-based. We also have term pricing as well, so it's pretty flexible pricing options to suit your needs. Another question on deployment. I mentioned a server, but we do also have a VMware deployment that is rapidly deployable in your environment. Another question on was specific servers. So they're mentioning a server by name, but we support any servers that we can do an NFS or CIFS crawl. We also support NDMP. If you have an NDMP-enabled server, we can set up an NDMP job where you could push the data to us for indexing as well. As I mentioned, we do support email, so Exchange and Notes. We also support SharePoint. There's a question about SharePoint. We support indexing of SharePoint inside the firewall. If it's a externally hosted SharePoint environment, we do not support that today, but are definitely looking at that. But SharePoint, we can do definitely the profiling and analysis of SharePoint environments, including the indexing of different document versions as well. Okay, I'm being told we're done for today, so we'll wrap up. If you do have questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we look forward to speaking with you in the near future. Thanks, and have a great weekend.